Well, hello. Welcome to our second episode of VoiceWorks. My name is Peter Stewart, and together with Suze Cooper, we are here most days of the weekday to bring you some updated news all about the world of tech. Suze, welcome back. Thank you.
Hello, hi there. Yes, it's great to be here again for our second episode. We've got a few more things to speak about this evening in the world of voice tech. As we mentioned yesterday, things are so fast moving in this industry at the moment. There's something coming out every day, something to speak about, and it's really great to be here again this evening.
And we welcome your comments. Of course, just leave them on Facebook in the usual way. We've got a couple of topics to talk about this evening. And in a few moments' time, we're going to be talking about the democratization of news. I'm going to be giving my a few thoughts on that. It's from an article via the BBC. But first, let's go back to Suze. Suze, you've got something to talk to us about, some possible changes with Amazon and Alexa, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So on Inc.com earlier today, there was an article that was posted that was about the Wall Street Journal Future of Everything Festival that happened in New York on Monday. Now, at that festival, there were two of the head honchos of Alexa. So Rohit Prasad, who's the head scientist of Alexa AI, and Tony Reid, who's the vice president of Alexa Experience. And they were speaking about the future of Alexa and how the future looks like Alexa will be able to handle much more complicated, more complex requests. So at the moment, we usually ask for one piece of information. We might say, Alexa, what's the weather like in Paris? And Alexa will be able to find that piece of information and deliver that to us as an audio file, and then the experience finishes. That's the end of it. If we would then wanted to find out something else, we would have to wake her up again and ask her another question.
Because now, as I understand it, Lexi, for want of a better term, has actually gone out and found that information, perhaps as it's been written exactly as that phrase, or it's been able to work out from some of your keywords in your voice message and some of the keywords that are written down somewhere else. It knows where to go, and hopefully it's going to find the best match for that. Yeah.
That's it. But I think what they were kind of saying at the conference on Monday is that, yes, Alexa will go out and find that information just as you've said. But then what will happen at the end of that experience is that Alexa will think, okay, this person's asked for the weather in Paris next Monday. Why would they ask that? Perhaps they're going to Paris next Monday. And the next question that Alexa would then fling back to you is, are you staying in Paris? Would you like me to find you somewhere to stay, or perhaps book you a ticket to get there, sort out your travel? So it's the idea that Alexa may well be able to pose questions to you based on the topic that you're speaking about. They're questions that you haven't even asked, but that through the AI and through the data and the learning that Alexa is taking on board at the moment may well be relevant to what you're talking about and may continue that voice experience.
So we're talking about learned behavior, which of course is another step beyond, isn't it? That's almost kind of becoming much more human, and the anticipation as well as to, you've asked this question, why it may be that you've asked that question, and what other kind of associated facts or help it might be able to give you.
Absolutely. But of course, in order for the AI to be able to learn all of this, it needs to be collecting the data. Now, how is it collecting the data? It's collecting the data by recording the snippets of information that we give ourselves to Alexa every single day. And that isn't something that everybody is happy with. But that is the reason Amazon saying, that they're collecting this data. Of course, they've got this amazing source of information in us, the consumer, at the moment. So why not use it to improve the tech? And they could not do it. They could not use us as the guinea pigs, if you like, but the tech would take an awful lot longer to improve, and these kind of voice experiences that are much more human and conversational would take a lot longer to become reality. So it's a real kind of balancing act between us giving away that data and kind of the feeling of being recorded in your own home when you're using these devices is not a nice one. But in order for the tech to move on to a stage where it could be that useful to us, whereby we could be asking for the weather next week and then asked, do you want to book your hotel? Do you want to book your travel? That would be a really useful voice interaction. And it would be an interaction we could do completely via voice as well. No screen really involved in that's needed. As long as you know where you're going and what times, off you go, you can book these things. So it's that real balancing act. But whether or not How fast this is all going to move, I don't know. And I think it is all dependent on the continuation of this data being collected from us every day.
It is, as you say, that balancing out the seesaw there, isn't it? About having a better user experience and having technology which can help you more. But to do that, it needs to know more about you, and also to be using you as a bit of a guinea pig, not quite the right phrase. But of course, this is perhaps where Google comes into its own a little bit more, because Google, because of its associated platforms, will be able to read your diary and read your mail and so on, and will be able to find out that actually in your diary it says, grandma's birthday in Paris. So it knows why you're going and when you're going, and perhaps when you're coming back, and whether or not you've already booked a hotel. But it may think to itself, well, hold on, maybe you need a cab from the airport to the hotel, that kind of thing, or whether you need a restaurant. So it's perhaps going that one step further, isn't it?
And it's whether or not you think that is useful, or whether or not you think that is creepy. I mean, you're absolutely right in that, Google has a whole host of information on us, our calendars, our emails, all of those kind of things. And no doubt using that information will enhance the voice experience and will make it more useful to us. But at what cost?
There have been some ways in the recent past, though, haven't there, Suze, about where Amazon has kind of realize that people are really more concerned about privacy and security than perhaps they'd imagined, or perhaps they thought they could get away with. And they have issued kind of patches or updates to what you can do to try and guard yourself against giving away too much. The mute button, for example, things like
Absolutely.
that. Also, it's much easier nowadays to delete your history, the voice recordings which are actually there on your device. But again, if you do that, and this was something that Terry Fisher was mentioning in one of his flash briefings in the last 48 hours, if you do that, then of course it means that all that kind of learned history about you has gone, and also perhaps the kind of voice recognition of you rather than someone else in your family.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. They have put these measures in place, I think, partly to show that they are listening and they are hearing that people aren't happy about this. I think you can set for Alexa to make a sound if she wakes up. So, if the wake word said, and rather than just having to watch out for the light, it can beep and make a signal which can actually alert you to the fact that it's started to record that next snippet of information. And you're right, we can delete the stuff that's on there via our Amazon accounts. I have to say, I have looked and I have done it, and it has taken me quite some time still to find it. So, I think only time will tell whether or not user experience will win over giving up our data, really.
But you know what? If they make finding a flash briefing as difficult as finding a flash briefing is, then I don't suspect they're going to be making something like deleting your audio history even easier than that.
No, I think you're right. I think discoverability is a massive issue in the voice space at the moment, whether that be for finding skills, flash briefings, all those kind of things. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right with that one.
Thank you. I'd like to hear that. Thanks very much. So if you've got any comments on this particular story that we've spoken about over the last 5 or 6 minutes or so, do leave some comments, and we may give you a mention either in today's show, if we get round to it, before we finish, or perhaps in a subsequent show as well. Thank you so much indeed for watching. And this is episode 2 of our almost regular, well, it's certainly regular, but not necessarily daily, of VoiceWorks live stream, talking about some of the new topics in the voice platform world. Now, neither of us are going to be around tomorrow night, so we'll be back on Thursday and Friday as well. And we're lining up something a little bit special for you on a Friday. So if you've been following me for a while, it probably won't take a huge leap of imagination to try and work out what it is that we might be doing on a Friday. Let's move on to our second story then. And our second story is something which has been posted by Mukul Devishant. He's the editor of BBC Voices, who Suze and I were fortunate to meet about 3 or 4 weeks ago at one of the several conferences that we've been to up in London recently to do with the emerging voice platform. And he's been talking in this article on the BBC website about, well, essentially what I could refer to as, although he doesn't explicitly, the kind of democratization of news and information. Talking about how even several years ago, he was almost dreaming of a way that people could use their voices to unlock a whole load of information, something that he called the spoken web. In an area of India specifically, where perhaps people have always got their voice, their actual vocal voice, although not necessarily their political voice, but they've got the voice, but they don't necessarily have access to the written word. They can't necessarily read, they can't necessarily write, but they are still hungry for information, particularly about news, particularly perhaps about politics. And of course, it won't have escaped your notice that there was an awful lot of political information over the last few days because of the Indian elections. But of course, one of the challenges that all of these smart speakers, that all of these voice assistants has in a place like India is the multitude of languages and dialects, and also the huge number of people, and the large majority of them, or a large number of them, are substantially poor. And quote says, Muckle, I imagined the adoption of mobile phones across India would immediately bring with it a spoken internet in many tongues. But now he points out that now is the time to have people's kind of voices heard, with the emergence of voice assistants like Siri and Lexi and Google Assistant and so on. And also he was talking about the success that the BBC has had with Talk to the BBC elections. And this was something that Susan and I went to a presentation about a month ago, with the inaugural event of the Women in Voice in London, which coincidentally was actually held at the BBC. And a couple of people from the BBC who had actually launched this particular Google action, it is on Google rather than Amazon Lexi, who had been over to India to see it being rolled out. Susan, I don't know how much of that you kind of remember, just kind of putting you on the spot here, but something that caught my imagination and reminded me when I read this about talking to the BBC elections was how important the name, the invocation name or of your skill or your action is, whatever you're choosing. And to have a bit of a sidebar, the BBC having talked to the BBC elections, also Take Me to the World Cup, and also Take Me to Wimbledon as well for the tennis. Now, let me tell you a couple of things about that. First of all, fantastic, of course, to have the invocation name Take Me to the World Cup, because it is like being transported to another place, another world, another time, where you'll be able to get audio out of your smart speaker in the corner of the room, maybe hear some interviews, maybe hear the sounds of the commentators, the cheer of the crowds, clips of commentary, team news, and all of that kind of stuff. It is like being transported somewhere, so much like radio does, of course. And they thought, this is fantastic. Yeah, we got something here. Take Me to the World Cup. Okay, now we'll do Take Me to Wimbledon for the tennis. And they tried, it didn't work, because Google came back to them. It's a great story. Google came back to the BBC and said, no, you can't have Take Me to Wimbledon. And they said, why can't we have Take It to Wimbledon? We had Take Me to the World Cup. And they said, trouble is, if you say to Google, Take Me to Wimbledon, it will actually give you driving directions to SW19 and want to know whether you want the high street or not. So they did have to change that to Take Me to the Tennis. So that's just a bit of a sidebar of that, but it reminded me of that particular anecdote. But yeah, it was really intriguing, wasn't it, Suze? That Women in Voice session that we went to about talk to BBC elections with this Indian coverage.
Yeah, I think what really hit me while we were listening to that particular talk was the access to information that people in India have, and the way in which they can access that information, and how much they need to trust the information that they're getting as well. So what they were talking about there really was that the voice experience needed to be reliable enough for people to get the right information. I mean, we've all heard the horror stories, the fake news stories, algorithms picking up on things, chucking it out more than it should. and then it's not, based in truth. And I think certainly in areas like this where information is so difficult to come by, the truthfulness and reliability of that news really has to be paramount with these things completely.
Absolutely. And just to finish off this article, Muckle saying issues like trust, which you were talking about, knowing who you are as a user talking to, and the provenance of information is going to be key. You know what, Suze, just as you were saying that, it occurred to me that actually to almost copyright the phrase, take me to, would be really, really useful for a skill or an action.
Yeah.
Just in the same way as, to maybe copyright the phrase, if you could, something along the lines of 1 minute in, 1 minute in health, 1 minute in finance, for a flash briefing, because I think those would be two really strong brands, two really strong kind of invocation names to be known by, which are pretty exact for those particular platforms in the voice space. Well, that roundabout wraps things up for another edition, episode 2 of VoiceWorks in our live stream on a weekday evening. Suze, we're not here tomorrow, but we are kicking around various places over the next few weeks, aren't we? What are you up to? You're up to something tomorrow anyway yourself.
Yeah. Tomorrow night I'll be speaking at the Digital Women event, which is being held at Bluewater Shopping Centre in Kent. It is the first of their kind of meetups, really, that's happening. It's a bit of a pilot, I think, to see how many people we can get to come along. But I will be speaking there all about flash briefings, a bit of an introduction to voice technology to everybody that turns up there. It's great.
Absolutely. So if you want to know more about what Suze is up to, Big Tent Social is her on Twitter, and also me. I'm Peter Stewart in real life, Tweeter Stewart, TWWTERSTEWART on Twitter. And between both of us, follow us on Twitter if you've got a mind to. And you'll also find a link to a presentation, a session, a seminar, a workshop, whatever you want to call it, an introduction to voice, which is happening at Amazon HQ in London in about 6 weeks' time. So that's about it. We'll be back with you from VoiceWorks and our live stream on Thursday evening, round about the same time. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Suze, good night.
Good night.